Hello everyone, it's David again, and we are on Season 3, Episode 14, Ship of Tears. We start off with ISN Broadcasting again, and a lovely African-American, Diana Morgan, pops up and says that they weren't attacked by the government forces, they were attacked by traitors to Earth kind of a thing, and that they themselves pulled the plug on ISN to prevent any disinformation from getting out, but now they are back on the air. And basically kind of made it sound like fake news that the government was actually doing it. President Clark's immensely popular martial law decree was being celebrated, and the enemies of Earth struck, and they responded and heroically saved blah 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 blah. And as Ivanova says, does anyone believe this load of crap? No, Ivanova, we don't believe it. But, what does that have to do with the news? We zip in, and Mr. Alfred Bester is hiding out in a Psi-Corps Star Fury, waiting for Captain Sheridan to show up. Captain Sheridan happens to be trying out the new atmospheric ships that he got from the Churchill when they broke away from Earth. We cue in the entrance, and we also have Joanne McCurtry as Carolyn, who is, as you'll remember, Alfred Bester's little side chick. Turns out Bester has not only a side chick, but a soon-to-be baby mama side chick. Which, does anyone know whatever happened to Carolyn's baby? I'm gonna assume it they didn't say anything during this episode when they first bring her on board about her no longer being pregnant. So I don't know what happened with, the baby. Sad to think about what the shadow surgeons might have done to this poor unborn baby. But at any rate, G'Kar ends up confronting Ivanova of being loud into the alliance. He's like, look, I've made, kept every word. I have made myself extremely useful to you. You need me. You need my Narns. Now you guys all need to live up to your promises and let me in. And we zip on in, and sure enough, Ivanova, later tells, like, hey, Captain, we gotta let G'Kar in. And I'm not sure if she is aware, but certainly Sheridan is aware. And they have a little bit of a discussion about why G'Kar hasn't been let in, that nobody really wants to sit down and tell G'Kar that his Narn, his homeworld, his people were all sacrificed to the shadows. And no one wants to be the first to break that rule, or that news to him, until Delenn eventually says, well, it was kind of my insistence that this all happened, so I will go ahead and volunteer. And Sheridan's like, are you sure you want to do this? And she goes, no, but we kind of need to do this, because, G'Kar is too important to what's coming up next. So Bester ends up getting brought on board, and Bester says that a group of aliens named Shadows have taken over Psi-Corps, and he is not going to tolerate that, because it's my Psi-Corps, and I've got plans for them. And basically Ivanova's like, oh yeah, really? And he's like, look, you are jealous of us because we are evolution's next step, and I've got plans for my Psi-Corps, and anyone that interferes with those plans is now my enemy number one. And so, as they say, your enemy is my enemy. Well, your shadow enemies are now my shadow enemies. So we zip on in. It talks about normals, and he also refers mundanes. I think it's the first time that we hear telepaths refer to normals or mundanes. People who want to separate, when the Nazis wanted to separate Germans from Jewish people, they called them rats. The Hutus and the Tutsis when they wanted to separate them, called them cockroaches in Rwanda during the Rwanda genocide. So it worries me, and it will, of course, become plainly obvious later after the particular set of Babylon 5 setup is basically there's going to be a telepath war. As we all know, and for those of you who are kind of new to this commentary, it's basically going to be setting up to the telepath war, which occurs right after President Clark is done away with. But let's see here. If you look at Bester learns of weapons components that were brought on board a ship, and he says, I think we can catch up to them. And since I'm a P-12 and we're traveling in space, hyperspace tends to magnify some of our abilities, and I can detect this ship for you. So they zip on along, and we zip on in, and I made a note here, and it's kind of hilarious. As they're zipping along in the White Star, and it's Bester's first time in the White Star, obviously, he kind of sits back as Sheridan gets out of his chair to go do something. Bester takes Sheridan's spot in the chair, and he sits down pretty much, I think, like Captain Kirk or Captain Chekhov would have sat in that chair on Star Trek. And I don't know if that was his personal slap at the Star Trek Paramount over their treatment of JMS before JMS found a home at Warner Brothers. See what you think of that. That's kind of a little sly slap in the face to them. We zip on in, and we learn as Delenn is kind of debriefing Jakar to come into the new alliance, she was ordered by the Grey Council to keep silent about what was being done to the Narn. And she basically said, look, if we wouldn't have been quiet, the shadows would have struck openly and they would have wiped out every single Narn. And he said, some must be sacrificed if all are to be saved. He once took that as revelation, but he says, I think that sentence is the greatest burden I have ever known. And she said, maybe one day you'll forgive me. And he says, maybe one day I will, but today's not that day, So we zip in, and they're on the White Star. And the White Star gets rid of the little shadow fighters that were sent in, and they grab a hold of this transport with the weapons components. However, a shadow vessel comes in, probably the base for the ships. However, the shadow vessel doesn't attack. And we learn later that the reason they don't attack is because Alfred Bester is there. We zip on in, and sure enough, they bring it in, the weapons components to Babylon 5. And one of the first things they do is they wheel off this alien who somehow committed suicide rather than being taken alive, and poured some acid all over him and the components, and you can't really recognize it. Two schools of thoughts. That one, it was a Drock surgeon, or I should say a shadow surgeon, that was sent to monitor the components. The other one is that it was a Drock to kind of, transport the components, and that, to me, it looks pretty much with the skeletal outline and everything like it was a Drock, that it was not a shadow surgeon. Yes, they're called shadow surgeons. No, we do not know what race they actually belong to. In fact, if they're not an offshoot of the Drock themselves, or if they're their own complete race. Most people think they are their own complete race. They probably escaped with the Drock when Zahadum was destroyed. So, we learn there are 100 humans in these sleeper tubes with the Psycor symbol on the outside. And Dr. Franklin looks at them, and they have these web plants. Do you know if they ever got rid of these web plants? If they were ever able to, even when the shadows had left? I'm not sure that I've ever been able to figure out whether they were able to get rid of those implants and bring these people out and back to normal. Excuse me. We also learn, if you don't like the shadow scream, this is probably not an episode for you. We first get a sight of the shadow surgeons implanting the device on Carolyn. Carolyn awakens and she bonds with MedLab Instruments. And she says, Alfred, help me. And we learn, of course, immediately afterwards that she was Alfred Bester's side chick. She reacts violently to Bester's Psychor symbol. Hint for later. And she says, and I had to write it down, she says, the machine says kill to protect. The sign hurts us. We cannot hear the machine. Alive in my mind we join, we fight. Make it stop talking in my mind. And then she sends Alfred Bester a series of telepathic messages before Dr. Franklin manages to successfully sedate her. We learn that Carolyn is Bester's lover and possibly his baby mama. Bester's wife is a genetic pairing and there's no love there. And we also learn that despite Bester being, high up in the hierarchy of Psychor, he does not have the ability to get Carolyn removed from or kicked out of Psychor or anything like that. So he was trying to get her to either join Psychor or take the sleepers, and then he could be together with her and the baby. And that was about 4 weeks before this episode happened, he said. We learned that they were going to use telepaths as components for the shadow vessels. And Bester leaves by saying, your war is now my war. So, of course, we all know Bester, as soon as his priorities dictate otherwise, he will not hesitate to betray anyone or anything. Because if you notice, he said that Carolyn is the only thing that meant a damn. Well, of course, he also said that same thing about his wife. And then doesn't he pick up that one little cadet chick on one of the, I can't remember if it was one of the movies or if it was one of the series, but, someone who's obviously like a good 30 plus years his junior. But, what the hell. Jakar enters the new War Room Council, and in a separate scene, Garibaldi is reading the Book of Jaquan, and he summons Sheridan, Ivanova, Delenn, and Jakar into the meeting room, and he's like, I've got it, and he starts thumping the Book of Jaquan, and it brings about the ever-popular meme, do not thump the Book of Jaquan, it is disrespectful. He talks about there were Narn telepaths and families, and they were all wiped out 1,000 years ago. But here's the other thing. It says the shadows were driven off by Jaquan and the last of the Mindwalkers. So there were still Narn telepaths at that time. So it's like, I wonder why, they couldn't have, got their blood off a sword or something like that. Or were the Narns just not... Because I guess, according to Jakar, the Narns weren't technologically advanced enough for the shadows to really worry about. So, I guess Narns wouldn't have been able to save the blood or the genetic material of their own telepaths to, at some future date, implant in a Narn host. So I guess they have to go running around trying to get everybody else, trying to get Lita to give her genetic material. We end with a very important note. The shadows have started attacking Rakiri space, openly this time, and it ends with the shadows whacking the Rakiri with their little, purple laser thingies. So, at any rate, lots of stuff to discuss down below. The next one's probably one of my most favorite episodes. I keep saying that it's my most favorite episode, and then the next one is, This one is going to be Season 3, Episode 15, Interludes and Examinations, where the Shadows and the Vorlons combat each other openly for the first time. You will see it on Babylon 5. So at any rate, like, comment, subscribe, and share. Hope to see you all next episode.